It's been time, over a year now, since we last ranked all of the 1200 and up CCF characters in the game, like the native tier 2s and the native tier 3s. And this year especially, as we've highlighted through multiple videos, has included a ton of new and reworked native tier 2, native tier 3 heroes. So because of that, we have to basically highlight this with a brand new tier list. But I'm going to use the exact same ranking as before because I think it was fairly straightforward. And there's not that many new characters to add to the list. So we have godly, meta, useful, borderline, and outdated. And we can get it started pretty quickly with the outdated ones. These are characters who have just not seen a uniform in so long, or in some cases have never gotten a uniform, that they just don't get used for any content. So I would say for sure Apocalypse and Dormammu, despite Dormammu's really good leadership, there's basically nowhere to use him. You could even argue Deadpool is outdated. Now he's about to get a rework, which is great. And yeah, he's still a support for Gwenpool. But yeah, no, I would definitely say he's outdated. I would say Null's outdated. He's also, remember, on that poll for the top 15 reworks of the year, which conveniently are all being hit one by one, like a drive-by shooting. So yeah, he's also probably due for something very soon. And then I would also say Mephisto is quite outdated. I know there's a lot of heavy hitters here. There's a lot of big boys. But yeah, that's basically how it works. Additionally, I haven't included them in the previous rankings, but I will include them here just because otherwise they don't get ranked with the 800 CCFs and they don't get ranked at all. Is the rest of the Black Order besides Proxima and Ebony Maw. Proxima and Ebony Maw are the most highlighted because of their support abilities, and also now Ebony because he has a tier 4. But Obsidian, Corvus, and Supergiant, I would say they're also outdated, not as badly as some of these other characters. But certainly not very good by today's standards, and basically only used sparingly in a fringe way in things like Conquest. And that doesn't really count because that game mode uses, that's like saying they're good for Shadowland, right? That game mode uses all your characters, so of course that would be used in those game modes. Now when we hit up Borderline here, you're going to see a lot of familiar faces. Like I think Molecule Man's leadership still makes him a little bit more relevant because it's so unique. But yeah, I still think it makes him sort of a borderline character. Again, Proxima, I would say she's useful. We'll put her useful for now, but she may end up dropping down to borderline because it's really just the support and nothing else, right? And we do need to differentiate with all these other characters. Havoc, even though he was introduced this year, and I think he's an amazing native tier 2 without a uniform, which is important because it saves you the crystals, I do still think he's borderline in the sense that he just doesn't bring enough to the table. He doesn't do enough to really be relevant. I would also say Gore and to an extent Kang are also sort of borderline in the sense that they, are really only used, again, for Conquest and very sparingly in Otherworld Battle, I would say. I mean, I think they can definitely be useful for Otherworld Battle depending on the bans, but more often than not, they get banned themselves, which just makes them pretty much useless. Moving up to the useful tier, because I think the majority of characters are going to land here. Like, I think Ebony is useful. I wouldn't call him meta, but I would call him useful for sure. I think that Strife is useful in certain contexts. I think you could argue Black Swan is borderline. You could definitely argue Black Swan is borderline. I think she's a little bit better than borderline, so I will put her in the useful tier for right now. I think Madeline is useful as well. Probably put her a little bit higher than most of the other characters. Maybe put her ahead of Ebony as well. I am trying to rank them, by the way, within each group. So we are trying to rank them within each group in terms of how useful they are, how strong they are. You could say, oh yeah, Odin is definitely useful. How useful? It's really up to whether you value PvP or PvE more. So you could sort of flip-flop these two. But I think it's fair to put them sort of side by side. I'd say Mr. Fantastic can be useful in the right circumstances. But again, we've talked about the issues with him and how you sort of have to build a mountain around him in order for him to move a little bit, and that's not really worth it for the majority of players. I think Thanos is actually really useful. This is Farmer Thanos specifically. I'm going to rank both Thanoses because they actually are so different, but as an alternative to Loki for ABL, and as just a really high DPS villain alien male who's actually like really good for world boss where Loki isn't, you actually have Farmer Thanos. So he's actually I think he's a little bit underrated. And Doctor Strange as the final useful one here. Just a very high DPS character who just, tons of burst damage. All right. So there we go. We get through pretty much all the schlop, and now we get to the good stuff. However, Doctor Doom. Is Doctor Doom useful? Yes, I would say he's useful. But unfortunately, like genuinely, I put him somewhere like around here. This is my genuine ranking for Doctor Doom. And that's really sad. I wanted to address this maybe earlier in the video, but I also needed characters here to really illustrate what's going on. Doom is terrible. Doom still needs a buff. Hashtag buff Doom. I don't know. I don't really know what to do to get the devs' attention. I'm kind of scared. It's been a week now since the update. I'm kind of scared they're not going to update him. They're not going to buff him. And that's going to be a big disappointment because, you know, I think it's just a huge miss. And it's really unfortunate. You know, with other characters, again, with lesser known characters, it stings, it sucks, but it's not a deal breaker. But Doctor Doom is like a top 5 villain. You can't screw up a top 5 villain. It's just unacceptable. So yeah, that's kind of the way it is. You know what? I would even say Quicksilver is useful. I wouldn't call him meta, but I would say he's useful. And I would actually say he's more useful, especially on like a one character basis. He's probably more useful than Mr. Fantastic. He might be more useful than Doctor Doom. But yeah, I think this makes sense. Now we get to meta and godly. Okay, well we can you know wrap this up pretty quickly. Jean is still super godly. No longer really relevant for PvP. I mean, not dominant for PvP. I would say she's relevant for PvP, not dominant for PvP. Certainly if 4 or 5 of the PvP incumbent metas, you know, Sentry, Surfer, if they're banned, Jean rises right back up to the top. But generally, they're not banned without her also being banned. So it kind of just goes hand in hand. I would say for PvP, she's probably here, maybe here. For PvE, she's still right up at the top. Right, straight up at the top. So yeah, that's still worth a lot. She's easy to play. Lots of canceling. Multiple good builds. You can go Judgment, you can go Rage, and she just claps. She just blitzes. Sentry, same sort of thing here. It's PvP focused, but he can also be used for PvE. I think people just use him for PvP because he's so strong. Again, it depends what your preference is. Glowing Eyes gang. If you prefer PvE, then I would put Jean ahead of Sentry just because she's available for more content. She hits more days of ABX, ABL. She's faster for GBR, faster for farming. If you prefer PvP, so that, you know, when I say PvP, people think it's just like one thing. But no, it's timeline battle. It's Alliance Conquest. It's Otherworld battle, right? So in that case, you'd put him ahead. Again, if your thing is PvP. But yeah, we'll let those two of them sort of duke it out for the top spot there. And then I think pretty much everybody else goes in meta. Yeah. So Scarlet Witch is very useful for a lot of content. It's all PvE focused, but I would say, you know, that really puts her in a good spot there. Wolverine, very strong for all PvP content. Same thing with Silver Surfer. I would give Silver Surfer a slight edge over Wolverine because of Reflect and how he can, you know, really clown on a lot of characters because of that. Then you have Adam there. Okay. Then, Gladiator, Cable. I think Cable should go next. I think Cable's quite strong for PvE content. World Boss, GBR. It sounds repetitive, but ABL, still holding on that ABL spot quite strongly. Still the best striker when you swap the uniform for a Black Bolt. Gladiator's good. Not as strong for World Boss as he is useful for ABX, ABL, but he's quite useful for ABX, ABL. Beta Ray Bill, I'd say he's borderline meta because he's a really good support. He's got a leadership, and he also does a shit ton of damage. He's a huge burst damage potential character. I would say that all that, right? You know, in the single package, yeah. Again, it really depends. If you're more of a PvP guy, you're gonna take Madeline over Beta Ray Bill. But if you're more of a PvE guy, Beta claps, bro. Beta Ray Bill claps. He's very, very strong. And then we have Thanos. This last Thanos here. Thanos better than Beta Ray Bill. Again, I think it depends on whether you are PvP or PvE oriented. I mean, to be fair, this Thanos is also good for other content. He's not as good as Farmer Thanos, but he's pretty close for PvE, you know, abilities. It's just that he's not absolutely meta because of the existence of Loki or Farmer Thanos being slightly better than him, etc., etc. But yeah, I think maybe his overall package, the leadership that he provides for villains, and then his abilities in PvP make him a little bit better here. But yeah, this is pretty heavily weighted to ABX, ABL, and PvP. right? So, because those 2 game modes are where you're going to get the majority of your good rewards. And then within world boss content, I mean, yeah, some of these characters are going to perform much better in world boss than others, especially Cable and Scarlet Witch, and Beta Ray Bill. But world boss is like the kind of the easiest content, so you don't want to give it the highest weighting because most players don't climb world boss. So yeah, I think this kind of makes sense. It's interesting because a year and change ago when I did the video, let's see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, here's the video from March of last year. So this is a little bit over a year ago, like 15, 16 months ago. This is what the list looked like. I hadn't finished it in the video, right? I hadn't finished ranking it, or I had finished ranking it. But it was basically just Jean and then a huge drop and then everybody else. And I mentioned in the video, I said, you know, like there's a massive gap between S and A tier. And that's not the case anymore. That's not the case at all. There's no single tier for Jean, right? She's there with Sentry. And then there's actually not a massive gap at all between Jean and Scarlet Witch. There isn't. And there isn't a massive gap here either. So I gotta give credit. In a year, the landscape has changed dramatically. Like, you gotta look at this landscape and be like, holy shit. Like, this is crazy how much it's changed. And keep in mind, when this existed, tier 4s existed, right? Already. So it's not like tier 4s didn't exist. Now, to be fair, there was only one tier 4, which was Jean, right? But even if you rank them as tier 3s, the list is fairly similar. This is not a tier 4 only list. This is also for tier 3s. And I think the list is almost identical if you just downgrade all of these characters to tier 3. Because, I mean, they all have their tier 4 up to Black Swan, right? Everybody else besides Strife, Proxima, and Black Swan, everybody else in the first 3 tiers has a tier 4. So I think if you just, boop, then the ranking pretty much stays. Maybe Odin moves up a couple spots because he's a very strong level 80. But yeah, it's really impressive. Stuff like this really gives me a chance to look and say, like, how much work have the devs put in to making these very expensive, ultra premium characters strong. And I gotta say, they've done a hell of a job. They gotta buff Doctor Doom, but with everybody else, they've done a hell of a job. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching the video. Smash the like button if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.